There are places in the wilderness that seem to be so attractive, so alluring, so beautiful that we sometimes ignore their darker side. The stories hidden behind one scenic waterfall changed the way I think about wilderness survival. This time on Rat and Cat, join me for a visit to a place I call Murder Falls. Welcome to Rat and Cat, where we search, survive, and explore. I started searching for missing wilderness adventurers Austin Oldfield and Christopher Zitzowitz because their story intrigued me. How could people just disappear into thin air? But as I looked into their stories and others like them, I started to notice several other patterns. Patterns that most folks don't like to talk about, and most places don't track. One of those patterns is time, place, and cause of death. Now those seem obvious, right? But the truth is, you hear crime statistics all the time about neighborhoods, cities, and counties, but rarely do you hear crime statistics about wilderness destinations. One place that brought this to my attention was a waterfall not too far from where I was living, Dougan Falls in Skamania, Washington. Dougan Falls is an extremely popular waterfall and swimming hole in southwest Washington. It's about an hour away from Portland, Oregon. Several thousand people visit the scenic oasis on hot summer days, and that's caused its own set of problems. Alcohol-fueled fights and stupid accidents were more than a daily occurrence in the past. But after the Forest Service started charging parking fees and local law enforcement requested more funding to patrol the area, rates of petty crime and injury dramatically decreased. But there's an even darker side to the falls, one that's difficult to unravel. I spoke with Skamania County Undersheriff Pat Bond last spring to help me better understand what was going on at Dougan Falls. Thanks for coming out here and meeting with me. There's a lot that goes on down here at Dougan Falls. There's been some murders and some other stuff. Just kind of give me an overview of what the situation is here.
Well, it's kind of changed. It's evolved over time. I know when I first started with the sheriff's office, the area here was, you could almost define it as the Wild Wild West. Everything happened. It was chaotic at times. There was so many people in a small area up and down the river road here at milepost 17 at Dougan, that really anything goes. We didn't have the staffing. We weren't down here a lot. We were call responsive only. And you'd have, like you said, we've had homicides, we've had rapes, we've had robberies, we've had kidnappings. At times we've actually had to escort EMS and fire in here for medical purposes. People would throw rocks and beer cans. It was really, really chaotic at best. And then it evolved. We did some more enforcement. We did public safety messages in a public safety corridor for about a 10-year period that really calmed it down, made it more family friendly. No alcohol, no after hours being here. After darkness you had to leave, no fires, no firearms. There was a range down the road here that people constantly use. Unofficial range, people would shoot in close proximity to the river. Recipe for disaster. So we were able to secure some funding, do a lot more enforcement down here, actually calmed it down. It did a 180. It was beautiful. And then of course, when the funding goes away and our presence kind of dissipates, that element comes back. So we're starting to see an uptick in those types of crimes here. In fact, in April of last year, April 1st, actually, 2017, we had a homicide here that we're just now getting ready to go to court and finish that up. So, beautiful area. Love to be down here. Like it to be better.
What do you think attracts people to this area that are prone to violence?
The rural nature of it. You're 17 miles from Washougal. It's still far enough away that they know that response is going to be limited, or it'll take longer for us to get here if we're not down here in the area. You're close to the metro area, so when it gets, and really we only see it when the weather's good. When it gets really, really warm, that's when we start to see the influx. More serious crime that really, that's evening hours, that can happen anytime. But I think it's the close proximity to the metro area. It just draws it. It's beautiful. The water is wonderful, dangerous at times when the water high flow, but it's very refreshing. People love to come out here. It's close, per se to some of the places in Oregon. So that's the biggest draw.
Can you tell me a little bit about the case where there was a body dumped here about, 18, 20 years ago?
It was about 20 years ago. We'd gotten a call that somebody had seen her in a pool. Officers and deputies responded, and we did find a homicide victim. It looked like a dump. Somebody had dumped her body. The crime didn't happen here. I think it is actually still currently under investigation out of the Portland area. Another one of those horrific things that, because it's rural out here, because maybe you wouldn't find somebody for a while, they decided to choose our area, of course, to dump her remains. Horrible.
Here's more on that case. On June 2nd, 1996, someone was snorkeling in the Washougal River about 100 feet downstream from the Dougan Falls bridge. They noticed something shiny at the bottom of the pool. As he dove closer, he saw a hand and an arm. He immediately went to the surface and called 911. Skamania County Sheriff's Office responded and called a dive team, and they determined that there was a body of a woman at the bottom of the river, fully clothed. Angela Kay Kruege was reported as missing by her boyfriend, Anthony Wallaib, on May 12, 1996. Wallaib told police that he last saw Angela on May 11 as she left their residence with an unknown male. Angela worked for an escort service at the time. More than 20 years later, this mysterious crime remains unsolved. Information about this case or any unsolved felony crime may be eligible for a cash reward of up to $2,500. You can call the Portland Police Department at 503-823-0000.
We've had the dumps. We've had suicides. As far as homicides, actual homicides, there's been probably 2 or 3. We had a murder-suicide just around the corner at Dougan Falls 10 years ago. Domestic violence issue. A husband killed his wife and then killed himself in the car.
I wasn't able to find any more information on the murder-suicide around 2007, but in 2009 there was a different story of a brutal attack at Dougan Falls. It was a February day in the winter of 2009, and Kevin Tracy was enjoying cross-country skiing when 2 men blocked his way. They asked for his wallet and keys. Tracy thought it'd be a simple robbery and handed them over, but instead, 34-year-old Michael Collins and his 17-year-old son began beating and strangling Tracy. "I'm sorry," one of the men said. "I can't let you go." Calm, cool, and collected, they just kept hitting me, Tracy said later in his testimony. He then blacked out. Sometime later, he woke up, saw a trail of blood, and realized he had been dragged into the woods. "I knew if they came back for me, I was done for," Tracy said. So he found a culvert to hide in and buried himself in a pile of leaves. Moments later, he heard women's voices above him and called for help. An ambulance was summoned, and a manhunt for his attackers began. Tracy's story was featured on the show America's Most Wanted. Shortly thereafter, the father and son were apprehended on their way to Mexico. In 2009, Collins underwent plastic surgery to repair his extensive wounds, and his attacker, Michael Collins, was sentenced to 14 years in prison for first-degree robbery. In August of 2017, there was another incident that I spoke with Undersheriff Bond about.
Just up the road, this is the 1200 line, 2000 line. It's kind of an intersection here. It was up the 1200 line here, a few miles. A gentleman had, and actually all the parties were kind of involved in criminal activity. But this gentleman was actually kidnapped from the city of Washougal, or Vancouver, I believe. Brought up here, made to dig his own grave. The suspects tied him to a tree and beat him severely. Left, said they would be back to kill him, and they never came back. He was able to free himself and was found walking along the gravel road out here and reported it to us. We actually found the place where he was at, found the tree, found the grave he dug, located the suspects, and actually they went to prison.
I looked into the incident a bit further and found the attackers Marcus Bedell, 25, of Washougal, Washington, and Charles Sample, 32, of Vancouver, Washington, actually stripped the 27-year-old Robert Downey naked before tying him to the tree. Bloody and bruised, Downey worked through the night to free himself from his bonds. It wasn't until the next morning that he was able to walk several miles out and find help. What was the conflict?
Believe it or not, it was over a dog.
A dog?
A dog, right.
Wow.
Yeah. These two gentlemen, at least one of them was in jail at the time, alleged that he had taken his dog, and then we went downhill from there. Almost resulted in a homicide.
This last year somebody was found near a gate
There was.
in the snow. What was the situation with that?
Well, that's still under investigation. We did find human remains near a gate 7 miles from here. He was listed as missing out of the Vancouver area as well. Found a vehicle about 2 miles from where he was found. So we're still trying to determine the hows and the whys and why he was up there, how he got here, what his ties to this area are. Doesn't surprise me that we found someone. It really doesn't. And we're still looking for another person that was associated with the car, actually.
A little bit more about that case. On February 22, Shante Conde left her residence in the Brush Prairie area with Michael Conley. A few days later, Conley's body was found upstream of Dougan Falls in the middle of a snowy road. He had one boot missing, and he'd walked several miles from his broken down car. His girlfriend, Conde, is still missing. Earlier in 2015, Conley faced charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree attempted murder, witness tampering, and intimidating a witness. According to court records, the charges were later dropped. What really happened to Conley and his girlfriend remains unknown. Were they from Portland, Vancouver?
Vancouver. One was Vancouver, one was Portland. That's the typical thing that we see when we have some sort of a major incident. Rarely it's a local, rarely. We talked about that kidnapping a little bit earlier. One of those was local, the other was from Vancouver. So we don't see a lot of local on local issue here. Most of it's all import from the metro area.
You said right where we're parked there was a homicide recently.
There was April 1st of 2017. A body was discovered here. And that we were able to get suspect information, made an arrest, and that's actually coming to litigation within the next month or two.
What are the names involved with that? That's public info, right?
Christopher Libert was the victim, and Benjamin Serrato out of Portland was the suspect.
I looked into some more details surrounding that case. On March 31, 2018, the two men, both age 40, drove to Dougan Falls. They were lovers, and Serrato said Libert was suicidal and asked to be killed. But the evidence says otherwise. The two men got out of the car. Serrato testified that he kissed Libert, read him his last rites, and then killed him. Local campers heard gunshots and came to investigate. They found Libert's body lying face down without shoes. He had 11 stab wounds in his neck, chest, and back, and 2 gunshot wounds in his head. Apparently, the two men had ended their relationship, and Libert had started a serious relationship with a woman. Serrato was homeless at the time and became jealous, and then murdered Libert. Okay, and then what was the one that was a month ago or 2?
That was the body we found at the Mile 7 here.
Oh, okay, the husband and wife.
Was it? No, that was the gentleman out of Vancouver and his girlfriend. The husband and wife was probably 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago.
And drownings, what are the situations that people get involved in?
Entrapment, a lot of that's entrapment. There's some deeper pools where we've had some people get their foot entrapped in. There's a rock formation under some of these falls. Then the hydraulics hold them down. We can't get them out. We've been very successful in at least 2 of the missions to get the person out and survive. I can't recall any fatal drownings we've had here, but we've had several close calls, several. And alcohol does play a part in some of these as well. If something isn't right, you think something's not right, it probably isn't. If you're in that lifestyle and you're bordering on the criminal activity, or you're living a dangerous lifestyle, obviously you're more likely to become a victim or be involved in something that's fairly serious. If you're not, very unlikely that anything bad is going to happen to you. But you can see those kind of folks. You know how they act. You know what they do. You know how they, you can perceive that. And call us. Don't be afraid to call us. That's what we're here for. It's not a burden on us. And I'm not asking to be paranoid. I'm really not. I want you to enjoy. I want people to enjoy coming down here and having fun and being with your family, being near the water and cooling off. And that's what this is for.
You may think of Dougan Falls as an isolated scenario, 1 in a million, and you may be right. Chances of something happening to you like this are slim, and most places aren't as convenient for criminals. But I guarantee you that there are other wilderness dead zones like this. In fact, if you live in a town or city, your chances of disappearing are even worse. Those of you who take the time to look closely at your town or your neighborhood and its history of violence will understand the dangers that exist there. Looking at Dougan Falls has changed the way I look at wilderness survival. In addition to animals and the elements, it's important to also look at the human element. I think it's always good to carry some form of self-defense and be prepared for the unexpected when you meet an unfamiliar person. I also try to make sure my family is never unarmed or left alone. The crimes at Dougan Falls have also made me take a broader look at the criminal side of missing people. And there are many sides. There are an estimated 2,000 serial killers loose in the United States. Many of these are hard to catch because they travel across country and grab victims off the side of the road or off the street. But you're most likely to be attacked, killed, or sold as a sex slave by someone you know. In addition to urban sites, sex trafficking at some campgrounds is a problem. As my regular viewers know, I've already started covering some of these topics since I first looked into Dougan Falls last year. But I think the biggest impact the Dougan Falls stories have had on me is my motivation. These are dark stories, and in researching them, I've found even more shocking, gruesome stories. While some of these stories I have to tell because I think it's the right thing to do in promoting wilderness safety, I also find myself needing more space from the topic. This summer, I want to focus more on exploring. Like Under Sheriff Bond suggested, I want enjoying nature to be my top priority, while being wise at the same time. But of course, I'm always attracted to a good wilderness mystery. If you want to be more wise on your outdoor adventures, I suggest you click on this link to watch my playlist about odd things that kill people in the wild and how to avoid them. There's also a link to America's overlooked missing people problem. Till next time, be safe, get out there, and enjoy the wild.